Well, it finally stopped raining, so I figured I'd jump back out here and get some work done. Working on something that was a little forgotten about. This thing. A lot to do to it. This video is not about this. This video is about some of the old school methods that people used back in the day and their way of thinking when they built a car. And one that comes to mind is a car that my cousin had bought, and it was a 1970 Mustang, and I could tell the guy that put the car together knew what he was doing. I could tell that he was old school, but very intelligent by certain ways that the car was set up, and the car was very radical, camshaft wise, and had a big intake on it, and Cleveland heads, and it had a 1050 Dominator carburetor. So my cousin, he called me up and he says, "Hey, you have to come see this car that I bought." And like I was saying, I looked it over and thought this guy knew what he was doing pretty good. He goes, "You know, this thing, I bought it like this, and the guy says it's needs to be gone over a little bit, but for the most part he ran it, and gave my cousin the whole lowdown on it, everything he had done to it, what he knew about it." So I'm looking the car over and I thought, well, this guy knows what he's doing, and the car sounds healthy, except it had a dead spot. And my cousin said, "I tried messing with this thing. I added timing. I've done a few things already before you got here." He goes, "I just thought maybe you could help me out with it." And so I said, okay. So we fired it up, played with it a little bit here and there, and it kept having a dead spot in the carburetor, and it was lazy. And I said, well, maybe it needs a bigger squirter in the carburetor. Now keep in mind, this is a Dominator carburetor on a 302. So I said, hold up a minute. And we hit the fuel linkage and throttle linkage, and I watched it spray, and I said, I don't think that's the problem. That thing's putting plenty of fuel in that carburetor. So then again, you have a 1050 CFM, so you never know. Sometimes a big shot of fuel would deceive you. You'll think it's plenty, and when you have a big volume of air, it still isn't enough sometimes. So anyway, we played with it and messed with it, and I come to the conclusion that I said, you know, this fellow that put this together really knew his stuff, and the car was fast, and according to what you're telling me, but I think you need to put a smaller carburetor on this thing. I said, maybe at least drop down to a 750. And my cousin's like, what? Drop down to a 750? I said, yeah. I said, if you go to an 850, it still might be too big for this. I'm like, I don't know where the RPM being stops on this engine. He goes, oh, I took it up the street. That thing goes right to 7,000, 7,500. And I said, well, we found that the car had pretty good gear set in it, like 513s or something like that, I believe. So I said, look, that's what I think, and I think most guys would walk up to that car and look at that carburetor and see that was a 302 cubic inch engine and say, that's too big of a carburetor. Now keep in mind, this had a decent converter in it that would go up like 4,000 or 4,500, because now if that had been converter that was like a tight side of the converter in gear, then it would be real lazy. But when I say lazy, this thing was kind of flat, open to the floor. Like when you hit it to the floor, stabbed it, it would take a second to rev over, and it was just flat in that area, even where it should be okay, like 3,000 above. It was still kind of not liking it. Kind of hard to explain this stuff, but our friend stopped by, and he was a guy that knew his stuff pretty good. He worked at a performance place, and he had his own shop, and he worked at a cylinder head place, and so he'd been around quite a bit, and he hung around the right people that really knew a lot of good stuff. So he specialized in wiring and voltage and all that stuff. So we told him about the car, and he goes, well, let's check it out, let me hear it. So he gets his little meters out and stuff, and I was like, what are you doing that for, BJ? He says, we're just going to do a little test here. I was like, well, everything seemed to be okay with the charging system and everything. He goes, well, let's just check it out. So we fire the car up, and he listens to it, and a few times, and he says, let me check this, and checks that. He starts putting this voltage meter here, checking different grounds and the whole 9 yards. I don't want to bore you for a half hour with what he had done here, but he was very thorough. And I said, you know, he said, well, that has a couple bad grounds, and I see the voltage is down on this thing. I was like, well, that's never good. I thought to myself, but that's not going to fix this problem here. But I let him just say what he wanted to say and listen to what he said. And my cousin did too, and he got in there, started yanking some wires, cutting, snipping, rerouting a few things, and got done with it. And he says, fire that thing back up. Let's see what we got here. And he listened to it. It sounded a little bit better when we stabbed it. And so then he started checking the timing back on it again after we'd been over it a few times. And basically started from scratch and kept adding timing and made sure the voltage was up on it and things like that. And to his liking. So anyway, he put the car in gear, and my cousin stabbed it. The car goes, it takes right off, no dead spot. I don't know if I mentioned I had a bad dead spot, kind of. That's why I thought it might be a squirter at first. Forget things when it's 30 years ago. So anyway, I would have had told my cousin to put a smaller carburetor on that vehicle, but it ran fine with the 1050. Now here's another thing. Would it have ran better with a smaller carburetor? I don't know. We never tested it. We never did the ET test down the track. But I think the car did run like low 11s according to the guy. And when I watched my cousin take it down the road and launch the car, I would say that was real close to being right. So here's the thing. I could have come along, my cousin would have respected my opinion and pulled that carburetor off, and most likely had ordered whatever carburetor I suggested for that car. And it might have been a little bit better, being the voltage was down. Maybe we would have put that carburetor on, a 750, or maybe even an 850. But I probably would have suggested a 750, going conservative. And anyway, it might have acted real good by doing that. And I would have thought I had saved him a little bit of time and effort, and maybe a little bit of money aggravated with that 1050 carburetor, maybe rebuilding the thing, and never had checked the voltage problem. And we would have put a band-aid on a fix that wasn't fixed, if you know what I mean. In other words, it could have been one of them deals where we could have put a smaller carburetor on, and it would have showed that it was better, the engine would have been responsive and liked it, that carburetor, and kind of never would have thought about the voltage being down being a problem. Now that's one thing you should check with any vehicle. Even if you have your own car and it sits a while, you always want to go back over that stuff. Put a voltage meter on, check your grounds. With all the electronics in these cars today, you can't, in my opinion, you cannot have too many ground wires. I had my car with a ground on each side of the engine, one in the back. And keep in mind this, if you have aluminum heads and aluminum block, that's even more crucial because you have nothing else to ground to. So you got to make your grounds and make sure that whatever you ground your ground cable to, that's actually a ground. So that's just something I wanted to talk about for a while. I didn't want to make a big long video about it, so I just thought, the best thing to do would be something I did in real life, and have it be where I had my opinion about it. And my opinion, like I said, would have been a false fix, because like a lot of times when you have a voltage problem and you put less fuel to something and it's not up to par, you'll think that that's a better way to go with a smaller carburetor and stuff. And sometimes the motor, even though it's small cubic inches, if you're turning that engine up and it has compression, like I forgot to mention, this thing had like 11-to-1 or 12-to-1 compression, so that allows you to get away with bigger carburetors and stuff in a lot of cases. It's mostly one of the deals where you have to go by a combination. More compression, the more horsepower you make, you can make a few blunders along the way, and you won't notice it as much when you're making 500 horsepower or 400, where if you're only making a 300 horsepower, you can notice things easier sometimes. All depends on the guy that tunes. Some guys just have a natural ear for that stuff. Other guys, they use all their equipment and they go by their air and fuel meters. And if you have a guy that has a good ear and has all that equipment both and knows how to use it, well, 3 out of 3 is a really good thing, in my opinion. The knowledge and a guy that really knows what he's doing and knows what to look for. And so we were lucky. We had a friend that specialized in that, and who's to say if we'd kept on that car, I might have, like I said, made my cousin spend money for something that he didn't need to spend it on. So we sold the vehicle. After a while, it sat there, and he had a few different cars he was working on, and he liked this one particular car, a Zephyr that we called the Fish. That was always his favorite vehicle, and it was kind of taken away from that, and he started getting where he had this car, then we had a couple other Mustangs we were messing with, and things like that. So we never did take the car to the track, but just seeing how that thing responded in the driveway and on this little blast down the street right there, and how it was stumbling before that, and he couldn't get it to where it would take a long time to clean out, and just to being real responsive and just hitting that throttle, have it be real snappy, spontaneous. It was a big difference. So anyway, I thought I'd talk to you guys about that, and these are just things that you always want to keep in mind, especially if you're not up on things and you don't know yourself, and you have a friend come over that knows about performance stuff. Make sure that guy tells you the right information, because some of these guys that's been around a long time, they're knowledgeable, but it doesn't mean we know everything, and it doesn't mean we know all the answers. I have people ask me stuff all the time, and there are certain things that I don't know about, and there's some things that I do, but I don't want to give somebody the wrong answer. I'd rather have them go to the person that specializes in what they're talking about, or suggest somebody else, or uh, lead them in the right direction. We'll make it that way. I don't want to ever push the narrative and just answer somebody with an opinion of mine, unless it's something I've done, and I'll say, well, we did this or we did that. But what we did might not be the same on your vehicle. So always keep that in mind. Even if you have a guy that comes along and he suggests something to you, and the guy is one of these guys that know everything off the top of his head, sometimes we're wrong about things. That's as simple as I can put that. Electrical problems are one of the worst things to mess with. Voltage and old time stuff wasn't that big a deal as far as that went. We used to run points back in the day, and so you didn't have all the stuff that you fellas today have. You guys are a whole different league when it comes to needing good voltage. Now, you always want good voltage no matter what, good grounds and all that stuff, but I'm just saying, a pair of points, all they had to do was make contact and work. So I don't want to mislead anybody there either. It's just one of them deals that's just, you need a very good, knowledgeable guy to take care of these problems. Make sure when you do check something that your equipment works right, because sometimes you'll have a gauge. I've talked about this in our videos, and maybe your gauge don't even work correctly. We've had problems with fuel. You put a gauge on the fuel regulator and check it, and you find out that the gauge you're testing with is bad. So always keep that in mind. So anyway, I just try to give a few scenarios and some personal experience, and you might say, you know, I have a vehicle, Terry, I've done everything and that carburetor's still stumbling, and we've checked it, we've rebuilt it, and the problem's still there, and it's not sucking air anywhere. We changed the timing on the vehicle and nothing helps it, and messed with the carburetor over and over. So it's just one of them deals. Like you can have a power valve bad in a car and a carburetor, and it will stumble, or you might need a different power valve to come in earlier. Like you might have a 6.5 power valve, you might need a 4.5 or a 7 or an 8, whatever next size is up. These are all things that you got to know about. So a holley carburetor, I'll throw this in there. If you have a car and you hit the gas pedal and it backfires to the carburetor, and you see a flame go poof and you hear a snap, chances are your holley carburetor, you probably most likely blew the power valve out of that carburetor. So if you have a car stumbling, that would be, chances are, that would be your problem. So a lot of times you're messing with your carburetor, have dirt or something in it, and it will stumble, and then the carburetor might clear out after a bit, and now you all at once, you say, well, it didn't stumble before, now it backfired a little bit and spit back. And always check your power valve in a holley carburetor. Thought I'd throw that in there real quick. See, I try to help you guys out. So anyway, I've gone through all these problems before. That's why I put them out there. Try to save somebody a little aggravation, maybe. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching, and we're going to be talking about this on probably the next video or so. Some of you guys might recognize this. It's been a while, but the video is not about this thing, but we'll be doing a video about it, tell you why I have it back out. This needs a lot of work. Take care, everybody, and God bless.